Before we get started, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing in this episode is medical advice, legal advice, or a recommendation to use any substance in or on the human body. Always do your own research and follow all applicable laws and regulations. Today we're talking about receptor saturation and the big question everyone eventually asks, can you take too much? This is one of those topics that sounds complicated at first, but once you understand it, it completely changes how you look at peptides, supplements, and really anything that works through signaling in the body. Most people think in terms of more equals better. If a little works, then more should work even better. That sounds logical, but when it comes to receptors, that's not how biology works. Let's break this down in a simple way. Your body communicates through receptors. Think of receptors like locks and compounds like peptides as keys. When the right key fits into the lock, it sends a signal. That signal tells the body to do something, whether that's build, repair, release something, or regulate something. Now here's the important part. There are only so many locks. That means there's a limit to how many signals can be sent at one time. So, what happens if you keep adding more keys? At first, you get more activation. More receptors get occupied, more signals get sent, and you may see stronger effects. But eventually, you reach a point where most of those receptors are already occupied. At that point, adding more doesn't increase the effect. You've hit what's called saturation. Once you're there, more doesn't do more. It just sits there, unused, or gets broken down and cleared out. That's the basic idea of receptor saturation. Now let's go one step further, because this is where it gets interesting. Your body is not passive. It adapts. If you continuously flood receptors with high levels of stimulation, the body can respond by reducing sensitivity. This is often called downregulation. In simple terms, the body starts ignoring the signal. It's like someone knocking on your door once you answer. If they keep knocking nonstop, eventually you stop responding. That's how the body protects itself from overstimulation. So not only can more become ineffective, it can actually lead to less responsiveness over time. That's where people run into trouble. They increase the amount, expecting better results, but instead they get diminishing returns, or sometimes no noticeable effect at all. Now let's talk about something important. Receptor saturation doesn't mean something stops working completely. It means you've reached the maximum effective response for that pathway at that moment. Beyond that, you're not gaining additional benefit. This concept applies across the board. It's not just one peptide or one compound. It's a fundamental principle in biology. Now, let's talk about timing because timing plays a huge role in this. Receptors can reset. The body can restore sensitivity over time if stimulation is reduced. That's where the idea of cycling comes from. Instead of constantly pushing the same pathway, you give it periods of stimulation followed by periods of rest. That allows receptors to recover and respond again. Without that, you risk staying in a state where the signal just isn't as effective. Now here's where things get a little more nuanced. Not all receptors behave exactly the same way. Different systems in the body respond differently, and some adapt faster than others. But the overall principle still holds. There is always a point of diminishing returns. Another thing people don't think about is competition. If multiple compounds are trying to interact with similar pathways, they can compete for the same receptors or downstream effects. That means stacking more and more doesn't always create synergy. Sometimes it creates interference. And when that happens, you can actually reduce the overall effectiveness. Now, let's bring this back to something practical. If you're using anything that works through signaling, you want to think in terms of efficiency, not excess. The goal is to activate the pathway effectively, not overwhelm it. That means finding the range where you get a response, without pushing into the point where you're just adding more with no added benefit. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest misconceptions. People often think that if they don't feel something, it's not working. That's not always true. A lot of signaling processes are subtle. They don't always come with a noticeable feeling. So increasing the amount just to feel something can lead you right into saturation territory. And once you're there, you're not improving outcomes. You're just increasing exposure. Another thing to consider is cumulative load. Even if each individual compound seems reasonable, stacking multiple things can add up. Your body is processing all of it. So you have to look at the total picture, not just one piece. Now, let's talk about how to recognize when you might be approaching saturation. One sign is plateauing. You're doing more, but results aren't improving. Another is needing more to get the same effect. That can be a sign of reduced sensitivity. And sometimes you might even feel like things are working less than they did before, even though you increase the amount. Those are all signals that something needs to be adjusted. Now, let's talk about balance. The body operates on balance. It's always trying to maintain stability. When you push too far in one direction, the body pushes back. That's why understanding receptor behavior is so important. It helps you work with the body instead of against it. Now here's something that might shift your perspective. The most effective approach is not about maximizing input. It's about optimizing response. That means using the minimum amount needed to get the desired signal. Anything beyond that is not adding value. And in some cases, it can actually reduce value. Now, let's zoom out a bit. Receptor saturation is not just a limitation. It's also a guide. It tells you that there's a ceiling, and that ceiling helps define strategy. Instead of chasing higher and higher levels, you focus on timing, balance, and consistency. That's where better outcomes usually come from. Now let's talk about something people rarely consider, and that's recovery. Just like muscles need recovery after stress, signaling pathways can benefit from periods of lower stimulation. That's how sensitivity is maintained. Without recovery, you stay in a constant state of stimulation, and that's when adaptation starts working against you. Now, let's bring everything together. Receptor saturation means there's a limit to how much signal your body can respond to at once. Going beyond that limit doesn't increase the effect. It just increases load. Over time, excessive stimulation can lead to reduced sensitivity, meaning you get less response from the same input. And the solution is not always more. Often it's less, used more strategically. Before we wrap up, I want to say this clearly. This episode is for educational purposes only. Nothing discussed here is intended as medical advice or a recommendation for use. It's your responsibility to research, verify, and make informed decisions within all applicable guidelines and regulations. If you take one thing from this episode, it's this. More is not better when it comes to signaling. Better is better. Thanks for listening, keep learning, and stay curious.